Hello everyone, this is Kevin from PCI Geomatics. We're just about to start the webinar. It's February 11th, 2020, and we're just going to give you a 1-minute warning to get settled into the room, and we'll be right back. All right, welcome everyone to our webinar entitled Sentinel-1 Tops Processing with Geomatica. So our presenters today are myself on the left and Jason Flatt on the right. We actually have a guest speaker today, which I forgot to mention, but there's Jason. He's standing by for live demos. And we have one of our radar scientists, Gabriel Gosselin, who's going to be with us, and he'll be joining us in a few minutes. So just some logistics. The questions panel is available to you at all times. We encourage you to type questions throughout the session. Don't wait until the end. We are standing by, so myself when Jason is presenting and Jason when I'm presenting and Gabrielle are all going to be available to answer questions throughout the session, and we'll do a live Q&A at the end. We will be providing a recorded session of the webinar probably within the next 24 hours. We typically do that, so but if you want to interact with us live, please stay with us. This is part of a series of webinars. So we released the latest version of our software in late November of 2019. And we've chose to highlight some key features that were part of that release starting last fall. We did a series of webinars in December, and we're repeating those webinars and we're adding a few tweaks. We've improved them a little bit and we've changed some of the data. And so we just did 2 of the first webinars this year. We did Object Analyst Automation on January 28th, and we did UAV processing on February 4th. Today we're doing Sentinel-1 Tops, and we'll be doing another webinar in February, which is going to be on RCM, so the RadarSat Constellation mission. So be sure to register for the upcoming webinar and also to look back at some of those past ones if you're interested in those topics. So here's a quick overview of the webinar for, so Gabrielle's just joining us, so just gonna take a seat. So the outline for today's webinar basically is an overview of the Sentinel-1 Tops processing workflow within Geomatica. We're then going to look at interferometric processing walkthrough. Jason's gonna give a live demonstration. And we're gonna do a short interview with Gabrielle, who just joined. I'm not sure, Gabrielle, if you can hit the webcam icon on your laptop there, just to give everyone a wave and tell them you're here. You can see that. Yeah, there he is. So there's Gabrielle. So he's joined. So you can turn it off again, or you can leave it on. It's up to you. So Gabrielle's going to be joining us. We're going to do a live interview and ask him about what he thinks about some of the upcoming exciting new things as it relates to radar. We're going to finish off with a case study on Ridgecrest, and then we're going to make sure that you walk away from this webinar with some useful resources that you can take with you for trying out the capability yourselves. So just a few quick words about PCI for those of you who are new to our company. So essentially what we do is we create and deliver geoimaging software products, platforms, and solutions. So basically what we make is first and foremost software, but that software can also be expressed in terms of a platform. We have a number of clients who take our platform. For example, there's a Python API that sits underneath all of our capability. And so the individual algorithms that we develop for all these different types of sensors and workflows can be leveraged and put together to create solutions. Sometimes we create those solutions for customers, and sometimes customers will create their own solutions using our platform. So, and we do carry out business throughout the world. We have been doing so since 1982, so we are in our 38th year of business. This really nicely shows our platform and how it works and how it can be leveraged. So on the left, we have our desktop software for image analysis. On the right, we have our high volume production, which is known as GXL. And in the middle, we have our workflow automation, which is available in all platforms, but it's essentially our underlying Python capability or API that allows you to develop workflows. So automation can be achieved throughout these environments, but each environment is tailor-made for different situations. Whether you're doing detailed image analysis, there's a lot more tools within Geomatica for doing that. But once you've determined your automated workflow that you want to scale out, then you can definitely do that either with Geomatica or with GXL, and we offer scalability and flexibility throughout our platform. So a few quick words. I've already positioned this, but basically we released the latest version of our software, which is known as Geomatica Banff. That was on November 26, 2019. So it's been just over 2 months, and we're bringing some new capability to the market, which we think is really going to make a difference for people who are working with different types of data. Today's topic is Sentinel-1, and we got some exciting capability to show you, and Jason will be giving you a live demonstration on that. Before we get into the actual content, we just want to do a quick poll. We'd like to engage with our audience and find out what you're interested in and what you're doing. So our first poll relates to what software you're currently using. So we're curious to see if you're using the Sentinel Snap Toolbox, perhaps you're using Gamma, maybe you're using SARscape, Geomatica, or other. If you are using something else, we're curious to know what it is. Don't be afraid. You can type in the answer in the questions panel. So it'd be interesting to see what you're using. We don't have an exhaustive list of everything here, obviously. But if you're using something else, maybe it's some code that you've written yourself, or it's some other open source thing that we haven't thought of. We'd just be curious to know what you're using. And I guess I'm not sure if people's answers are going to be biased towards Sentinel-1 today. Obviously, that's the topic of today. But yeah, so I'm just going to close that down in a few more seconds. So 3, 2, 1, and I'll just share the results so everyone can see. So I think it's no surprise that Snap Toolbox is number 1, followed by, I guess, Geomatica and then SARscape. So not surprised by that. The fact that ESA makes the software available freely and has developed it over the years to support Sentinel satellites as part of the Copernicus mission is obviously a great benefit. But we think we've developed some things that will make your life a little bit easier within Geomatica, and that's what we're here to talk about. So on that topic, we just want to start by giving you a quick overview of Sentinel-1A and 1B processing. So there are 2 satellites that are collecting C-band data, dual pole C-band data. And TOPS is a specific processing mode that we didn't initially add in Geomatica because it is a little bit more of a special mode that requires quite a bit of pre-processing to assemble an image and to make a useful product. And I'll just quickly go through that, but in the context of INSAR, Sentinel-1 is a great sensor because of the revisit. So here we see an application of INSAR. I believe it's in Scandinavia, perhaps in Sweden, looking at infrastructure monitoring. So you can see that depending on construction that's going in, whether it's tunneling or whether it's aquifer depletion, that does have an impact on infrastructure. And so INSAR is a proven technique for monitoring the effects of those types of construction works and so on. And really what our INSAR package allows people to do is to generate accurate and detailed interferograms. So those can be done to either produce deformation maps, which is what's of interest in this particular application, or if they want to extract elevation, then that can also be done as well. So some of the key things with regards to our INSAR technology in BAM, so we've added support for Sentinel-1, which includes the interferometric wide and the extra wide SWA, so IW and EW. And the majority of the data that's collected by Sentinel is in IW mode. We've also added debursting technology. So if you're used to working with Sentinel-1 data in SNAP, you'll know that you have to work on a swath by swath basis. They break the IW image into 3 separate SWAs. So we've actually developed technology that will assemble all of the bursts and all of the SWAs into a single contiguous file. What that means is you can carry on and treat the data just like any other data within PCI's environment. So you basically use our well-known technology, our GDB technology. So SAR ingest would be the way that you would get imagery in, INS CoReg, INS raw, like all of these existing INSAR algorithms that we've been developing and improving over the years are going to be available. It's going to be transparent to you as a user that it's a Sentinel-1 data set. And Jason's going to be walking you through those steps and giving you a rundown. So obviously the other thing that's been added is we have very, very accurate and precise positioning of the imagery to within 1 or 2 pixels. And that's because we're leveraging the state vectors within the imagery to create our own RPCs. So the RPCs will really achieve a high positional accuracy. So what that means is if you're looking over time, or if you're just trying to position your image correctly on the ground, then we've developed technology that's really going to help you to achieve that more easily. Sentinel-1A, as I mentioned a little bit, is widely used across the industry and academia. That's mainly because the IW mode is used during data acquisition. It has a high temporal resolution. So between the 2 satellites, there's a revisit of 6 days, so between 1A and 1B. And also, it has wide area coverage. It has this very unique TOPS mode, which leverages antenna swing technology to collect a large area and still be able to generate an image that's useful for INSAR. And of course, it's accessible. It's free to download, and there's a lot of it. This is just a schematic view of Sentinel-1 A and B acquisition. So what you see is basically an exaggerated view that shows the swinging of the antenna. So there's illumination on a swath by swath basis. You can see IW1, 2, and 3. And as it's illuminating the ground, it's actually swinging the antenna to get a much larger area. So there's a couple of different concepts. There's the bursts, which are the small rectangles, and then there's the SWAs, which are the same color. So you can see red, blue, and green. Those are 3 separate SWAs, and each one of those are composed of multiple bursts. So putting that together into a single image is obviously of interest. This is just a video animation showing how that antenna swinging pattern works. So you can see that it's illuminating different parts and scanning as it's going over a particular location here in the northern regions. Some of the challenges include that the data sets are supplied as separate swath files. So we have swath 1, burst 1, swath 1, burst 2, and so on. And so the size of each swath and burst varies. It's not always the same. So in terms of implementing the algorithms to assemble this data, we really had to develop some custom code to handle all the different situations. The organization of the burst and the overlap is not known, as I mentioned, and it does change. And so what we've done is we've developed debursting algorithm to allow you to work with a contiguous single geocoded image. So that means that We retain all the pixels. We sort of eliminate some of the data because we reduce the overlap regions that are stored, and really we give you the option to work with a single image. So it's quite advantageous to work this way. So I've already mentioned some of these, so I won't repeat them here. But here's kind of a view of the burst and the SWAs, and you can see that there's actual gaps, but each one of these bursts has overlap along track and across track. So basically, the way that this is handled in our software is we read in all these separate bursts and all these separate SWAs, and we assemble them into a single contiguous file. So if you want to work with a specific bounding box, you don't have to figure out which swath it's located in and work with that swath, and then find the neighboring swath and reconcile which part of the image you need to pull from the other swath to complete your AOI. You can simply read in the image as one file, and then you can work on it directly with your area of interest. This is just a view of some of the things that can be done. This is not from Sentinel-1 data. It's from, I believe it's from RadarSat-2, but basically what this is showing is some of the different products that we can generate. So on the left, you see a digital terrain product which representing elevation. In the middle, you see a cumulative deformation product, and on the right, you see the velocity. So some of these products are also possible, obviously at different resolution. This is a higher resolution RadarSat-2 image product, but with Sentinel-1, similar types of products can be generated. I would say primarily for deformation analysis, a little bit less for elevation extraction, because the baselines are not suitable or optimal for DM extraction, although there are some cases where it's been useful. So with that, I'm going to pass over to Jason, who's going to take it over from here, and then I'll be back a little bit later.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Kevin. Just going to show my webcam. Perfect. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm just going to start showing from here. So just to give a brief overview for the Ridgecrest Earthquake, for those who are unaware, in July, the week of July 4th, 2019, there was a magnitude 6.4 and 7.1 earthquake that occurred in Ridgecrest, California. And to process the deformation map, we're going to work with 3 Sentinel-1 TOPS IW images, 2 of which are prior to the event and 1 of which is post-event. This is the workflow we're going to be using, where we downloaded the imagery from the website, from Copernicus. We then ingested and processed the deformation products. And now this workflow that we see here is actually the same workflow for many other different types of data sets. So not just Sentinel-1 TOPS, this can be used for many other types of InSAR deformation mapping projects. And I'm going to go through each of these steps by showcasing and talking about them using the results. So I'm just going to minimize this and open up my focus window. And so what we see here first is the raw Sentinel-1 TOPS images. Haven't done anything to them yet. And so this is the first image. We're working with one image captured from June 28th, another from July 4th, so that's the first day of the week, and then July 10th. So we have 2 images before, 1 after. And so before we continue, I'd like to just bring everyone's attention to a few things. I'm going to just hide these. First is that what you can notice is that the images that have been loaded are already debursted. And this is presented, as Kevin mentioned, as a contiguous data set. So it's making it easier for the user to, for instance, identify an area of interest that they want to process. So the user doesn't have to concern themselves with swaths and bursts, and on screen it's projected in a map projection. And the system, is going to handle the complex data, enabling the user to process analyze amplitude and phase, and then acquire additional information. Now it's important, as Kevin mentioned before, that all that overlapping data, although it's not visible, is not removed, it's just hidden. We're still going to be leveraging it for the subsequent processing steps. What we're seeing now is In the RGB mapper, what we see is VV and the VH. We're displaying the VV channel using our red and green, or red and blue, sorry, and the green as VH. So the swaths are clearly visible. And this is captured in ascending data, but we flipped it so that the north is at the top, all automatically. So now the first step or the second step after we ingest the imagery is the co-registering of images. So first the user picks a reference. So for instance, I chose the first image of the in temporal. So the June 28th. So just to show, we have the 28th, the 4th of July, and then the 10th. So I chose the 28th as the reference, which we would then co-register the 4th and the 10th to. This puts them all then in the same geographic frame so that we could then orthorectify them all. Now I showed it to you in north up, but once we run the process, I just want to quickly show it in raster up so that we can perform QA just to make sure that the pixels are lining up. So I'm going to zoom into a little area here just for us to QA because there's many different QA steps we can take just to ensure the data is acting accordingly. So in this area, for instance, my cursor is on one of the pixels, and we can cycle through the reference and the July 4th, and we can see there hasn't been any change. So the co-registering has worked. And then the 10th, which is after the event, so there has been a shift, but all of them have been co-registered because we can open up supporting information from our text documents to identify the overall RMS of the GCPs collected for this co-registering. And we can see here's the initial number of GCPs collected, and we performed an automatic refinement to get an overall RMS. Just gonna zoom right here, of less than 1 pixel, so around 0.05. Now, if there was any shift, we would notice. And so once we've co-registered the imagery, we can then generate our interferograms. So in our InSAR raw tool, or operation, which is our next step, requires the imagery to be co-registered. And so once we generate them, the imagery can be analyzed for phase. This information is going to be generated as with 2 interferograms. The first is before the date of the earthquake, and one is with after the earthquake. So the 28th to the 4th, and the 28th to the 10th. And once we generate it, we can analyze the phase and coherence information. So we can look at each. So first, what we're seeing on our screen is the amplitude, which is related to coherence, and it's a value between 0 and 1. 1 is higher pixels with higher coherence, and 0 is pixels with lower coherence. So we can perform our first QA with the amplitude from both the data sets. So we can right-click on the first interferogram and select histogram. And what we see here is the distribution of pixel values, and we can see there's a higher trend towards 1. So there's a higher coherence with this data set. While if we look at the second data set, the second interferogram, we can see that there's been a loss of coherence. So in this area, for instance, in the dark area that's completely lost, the shift of pixels has been too great. So there's been a significant amount of movement. And if we right-click again, view the histogram, we can see that there's been a very big change with that, and there's a lot more pixels on the left side, so getting closer to 0, so showcasing that there has been a significant loss of coherence. So now we've visualized it with just the amplitude. However, we can also view it utilizing the amplitude as black and white and the phase as the color. And here's where we can perform an additional QA. We can just zoom in, for instance, to look at the fringes. So it's important that we have, for the good interferogram, that has nice fringes. So these are clear, means we have a good interferogram. And if we don't see the fringes, we won't be able to generate our final result. So this is a good point for QA. Now, this is before the event, and this is after. So there's been significant amounts of shift again. So that's just one of our ways to check. So after we've generated the raw interferogram, these fringes are still affected by flat Earth phase, the topographic phase, and phase errors that are due to orbital effects. So our next step is to then remove all of these effects. So I'm just going to open up the PowerPoint so we can see. So the first step is to remove the flat earth and topographic effects. Now, we do this utilizing a DEM, and it's important to note that the quality of the DEM will actually have a significant impact, or will have an impact on the results. And for this instance, we're actually using an SRTM, so there will be few artifacts in our final output. But we'll be using INS Topo, which will remove the flat earth and topographic phase. And we know the flat earth because we're working in Earth model of WGS84 and the Earth orbit. And so to remove the topographic phase, we will use the DEM. We can then correct the orbits utilizing our INS adjust. And now the orbits of tops are well known, so it won't have a significant amount of effect, but we can just visualize the report again, and we can see that there has been some adjustments, although quite minimum. But we just have a number of different QA steps for the user to check, which is output in text files. So once we've corrected all these effects, we can then perform IMS Gold, which actually produces a crisper product utilizing an adaptive Goldstein filter. And why this is so important is that it's a filter that will filter highly in areas of low coherence, but it will filter far less in areas of high coherence. So it actually makes decisions automatically. So the user just needs to specify a window, but you don't have to specify any other value that will apply to the entire image. You just let the system run automatically, which is operationally just more efficient. So you're not setting one whole value for the entire data set or for the entire image. So after we run the IMS Gold, we're going to then have just two interferograms that are going to represent deformation. So here, this is now viewed as north up. The previous ones were viewed as raster up. So we can first see the first image, so before the event, not a lot of changes occurring. But once we look at the after the event, we can see the colors are changing in direction. So especially around the slip area, we can see, if we zoom into the area of interest, we can see the colors of the fringes are actually going in two different directions. So that's how the Earth has moved, which is really exciting. So once we've QA'd and filtered and corrected our interferograms, we can then perform unwrapping. And so PCI or Geomatica utilizes software called Snafu, which is all done under the hood. So it's done on Windows. Snafu is generally done on Linux, but we have our software which automatically works with it and provide the information required for the program. So all the user needs to do is set the inputs, and it will perform the unwrapping. So what we can see is we have our two unwrapped images, again viewed as north up or as raster up. And at this moment, we need to identify points that will be considered to have high coherence because these two data sets are not connected yet for us to perform a deformation map. So we need to identify areas of high coherence that are the same. So generally, of course, we would have a larger data set to have a higher statistical accuracy, but I'm just using two images, so there can be issues or artifacts related to that. So utilizing INS stack, I combined the two, performed a test to just determine pixel values that maintain the high coherence, and then just created a number of vectors across the overlapping area to showcase those points. And these will be identified as, when I perform our next step, INS CalDefo, as zero subsidence, so that we can then perform our deformation mapping and really identify the areas of change. So once we run the INS CalDefo for the deformation map, we have our two deformation maps. So this is before and this is after. And now they're not being enhanced utilizing the same pixel values. So I'm just going to select them both. I'm going to click the adaptive enhancement. And what we can see when they're enhanced together, that the first image, the before the event, showcases very little deformation occurring, which is as expected. However, when we showcase the post-event, we can see significant deformation occurring in the region that we've been working with before, or that we've seen through all the steps, while the top right corner has seen less deformation. So this is just one way, or the workflow, one of the workflows a user can employ for deformation mapping, and it's not just used for the Sentinel-1 tops imagery. This can be used for many other different types of SAR images and satellites. Back to you, Kevin.
Great, thanks, Jason. So let me just grab control again here. You just give me a verbal confirmation you can hear me all right, Jason? Is everything okay with the audio?
I can hear you all right.
Perfect, okay. All right, so let me just change the presenter real quick. Whoops. Can you see the screen all right? Sorry, Jason.
Yeah, I can see your screen.
Here. Okay. Okay, so we're going to move to the poll, and I'm going to share that out right now. Sorry, just a little bit disorganized here. Gabrielle and I were chatting while you were working hard, Jason. Okay, so we're wondering if you can share with us what challenges you're encountering as it relates to processing data. So maybe what you're experiencing is, oh, sorry. I'm just gonna make this a bit bigger. So the poll is available now. So do you have what challenges are you having as regards to Sentinel-1? So is it working with individual SWAs? You find that cumbersome? Processing software, you find it slow and difficult to use? Maybe you need to set up processing chains for big data. Maybe you find that it's a poor integration of steps between ingest and SAR and geocode. We do offer that in our software. Everything's nicely integrated, or maybe it's something else. So going to leave that open for a few more seconds just to see what are the majority of issues that you're encountering with Sentinel-1. Hopefully you've seen some of the capability that we have to offer between the PowerPoint and the live demo, and it gives you a sense of what we have. We are curious to see what are some of the challenges that you have. So I'm going to close that down in 3 seconds. So if you haven't voted, last chance, 3, 2, 1. And I'm going to share that out. So it looks like setting up automated processing chains for big data, that makes a lot of sense because Sentinel-1 is just continuously collecting data nonstop. So being able to automate all of that is obviously of interest. And then a mix of answers as it relates to some of the other things that we asked about. So with that, I'm going to maybe ask Gabriel to turn on his webcam, and we're going to move to our SAR discussion. So the one of the first things that we want to talk about is, oh, sorry, I'm just going to, Jason, maybe you can share the slides so that I can read my notes here, if that would be all right.
Of course, I'll be presenting.
You could just leave it on Gabrielle's headshot there. Oh, I got to close the poll there, so that's good to know.
There we go.
Okay. So is your PowerPoint up, Jason?
There we go.
Okay, great. So Gabrielle, welcome to the webinar, and how you doing?
I'm doing good, thank you.
Okay. So we just presented Sentinel-1 tops. I know that you've been really involved in terms of developing that technology. Can you tell us about the design philosophy? Like, what was the main reason why that was done and how it was done?
Okay. The philosophy behind all the support of Sentinel-1 was to be able for top SAR, like from IW or EW SLC mode, it was to be able to process it like any other image. So that means that we have done a design with the objective of assemble all image into one big tile so you can process it. So it's seamless for the user. But of course, all the information across the SWAs and the bursts are kept also into the PIX file so they can be used along the SAR processing chain, but the user doesn't have to worry about this. So we
Right.
do everything.
So what are some of the segments that are carried through? Like, when we do the SAR ingest, we retain some information. What are the key pieces of information that we keep along the way?
But for the top SAR, along with the usual segment, like the orbit segment, like the GCPs, the vectors, we also carry all this extra piece of information in the overlap area between the burst and the SWAT. So they can be used along the SAR processing chain.
Great. Okay. So I think you've already touched on it a little bit, but what do you think this means in terms of the advantages? Like what does this mean in terms of a workflow, and what are some of the advantages that you see?
Okay. In some softwares, you don't have the choice then to process each SWAT individually. So that means you have to process it do 3 times the same processing, and at the end, stitch the product. So in our case, what we want to do is to really be able to process the entire image at once, or by also considering the Sentinel-1 image as a single image. It also allows you to, let's say you have a region of interest that is right in the middle of 2 SWATs.
Mhm.
So that can be very, very, how can I say, very
Challenging.
difficult challenging to process this area. While in our case, you specify an area of interest, and even if this is in the middle of 2 SWATs, it will be processed seamlessly.
What are some of the difficulties if you did have to process the AOI across 2 SWAs and then assemble it together? Maybe give our audience a view as what are the challenges, not using our tools, obviously, because you can do an AOI, but so they would have to ingest each piece separately and sort of do the whole workflow and then assemble at the end. Is that kind of the biggest challenge, or?
Yeah, basically, yeah. In some situation, for some software, you would have to apply the exact same process for half of your area of interest and the other half separately till the end, and then try to assemble it. And if you didn't use exactly the same parameters, let's say, or when you stitch the results together, you might see like seams in your product.
Right.
It can happen depending on what kind of process you have done. So it's better to process it as a single image, to deburst it really once. So after that, the end product, the result is, it doesn't have like the seams in the middle of your area of interest. That's one of the advantages.
Great. What do you think it means from an application point of view? Like what are some of the benefits, or?
But I saw in the poll that one of the major preoccupation of people is the automation. So that means that what you want typically is to spend less time processing your data and do more time to do your analysis.
Right.
So that's what's the philosophy behind the Sentinel-1 support in Geomatica, enable the user. It's my personal opinion, and I'm sure it's shared by many people.
Make the user's life easier. That's a good thing, I think.
So you can either use Python scripts, or you can use other environment in your software suite. So you can really do it in automation. And like I said, by processing the image as a single image, you don't have to repeat the operation. So that's really speed up the process. And also in Geomatica, we also make sure that all algorithms are really efficient in terms of processing. So the rapidity process, the speed of the process is also an important consideration here.
Right, perfect. Maybe we can spend a few minutes just talking about future development as it relates to SAR. So Jason, if you can go to some of the slides coming up on future development tools. So Gabrielle, can you tell us a little bit about what's happening? We've got a slide here on SAR synthesis and SAR reprojection. Maybe give us a rundown on what's coming next.
Yeah, because we're always in a next phase of development, of course. So what we're working on right now, and it's almost finished. So we will be part a future release, not so far from now, is we're working really towards the analysis ready data. So for SAR, what it means is to be able to perform a topographic calibration. So let's say you want to apply a sigma node calibration, but you also have to take account of the slope effect. You also have to know where their layover R's and for shortenings area are. So we're developing tools to do a true topographic calibration, so you don't have the effect of the topography. So if you want to stack your data to do change detection, for instance, you want to detect a true change, not change in the viewing geometry. We also have another really cool tool. It's not, I won't call it a tool, a really cool functionality that is coming. And sometimes in theory, less processing you're doing to your SAR image, closer you are to the signal, so better your estimation of different variables will be. So we have a tool called SAR Reproj.
Okay.
That will be available soon. And what allows you is to reproject, let's say, vectors that can be point vectors, or they can reproject optical data, like Landsat image, spot data, any optical image that have state vectors onto the SAR slant range geometry. So you can do all your analysis if you want in the slant range geometry.
Jason, I think if you can advance the next few slides, there's some examples of that coming up, right? Is that right? Maybe you can run us through these slides here, Gabriel. So we have, I don't know if you can see on the screen or not, but Jason's, get some, basically what Jason is showing is the SAR TopoCal results, which is showing, I guess, so what is the SAR TopoCal slide showing? The terrain correction for the SAR data based on the illumination?
So all the slopes that are facing like the radar of course are brighter. So the goal of SAR TopoCal is to identify those area, and since we know well the viewing geometry and we know well the position, so if you have a good DEM, because to do this topographic calibration you need to have a digital elevation model, and with the radar state vectors we know exactly where the slopes are, so you can apply compensation factor to remove the brightness from those areas.
And I guess in doing so, you're better able to combine with optical data as well. Is that one of the advantages?
That's one of the advantages, but the main advantages, like I've mentioned, of the topographic calibration is to remove those artifacts, because that give you like a sense of 3D in the SAR image, because like all those shadows are like really beautiful to see, so that give you a sense of the topography. But when you want to do, let's say, change detection or time series analysis, you really have to remove those artifacts.
So what about if you're working with imagery? Like in the case of Sentinel-1, the viewing angle is always the same, but if you're working with a sensor that can collect at different viewing angles, will this account for those changes in viewing angles and where the slopes lie? Is that the idea? Or?
Yeah. As soon as you have a DEM and a satellite with state vectors, you can have whatever the viewing geometry if you want to combine different imagery together too.
Okay. So is there any limit in terms of instance angle range that can be used to correct for the geometric effects and so on, or?
No, I will say in that case that two main important points is the quality of the DEM you have in input.
I'm not sure if your mic got muted there. Did you hit mute accidentally, or can't hear you anymore?
Okay, no.
Yeah, you're back.
Sorry about that. No, the two most important thing in that case is to have a good DEM and good state vectors.
Cool. Okay, I'm not sure if there's anything else. I'm just going to quickly look here. Gabriel's going to be standing by for questions, and we're going to go to our resources. Jason, if you can pull up resources, that would be great. So we're going to go to Q&A in a second, but just before we go there, I just want to highlight a few things. So we do have a series of resources available to help you with Sentinel-1 and in general with using our software. We have a dedicated support site, support.pcigeomatics.com. We also have a Python cookbook. The easiest way to get there is to just go to dev.pcigeomatics.com. And we have a community forum as well. So if you want to ask a question and you want to interact with other Geomatica users, you can do that there. Of course, we monitor that community forum as well, our support team, as well as our other technical support specialists within our company. One cool thing that we did last year, twice actually, once was here in Ottawa and the next time was in Poland, is we actually gave a SAR course. And we set up and we recorded the whole thing when we were here in Ottawa. And day one of that SAR course, which is an introduction to SAR, is available on Udemy, and it's completely free. So we encourage you to go check that out and download it and view it. And we, of course, have all of our YouTube channel playlists and content. Next slide. Yeah, so there's some examples there of what that looks like, our YouTube playlist and so on. So with that, I'm gonna move on to questions Q&A. So if there's any specific questions that you have not had a chance to ask during the session, we encourage you to type that in now. But we had this question, Gabrielle, that seems to come up quite a bit. And the question was, can we perform small baseline method using Geomatica for Sentinel-1 sensor? Can you explain to us what SBAS is and why this person is in particular is asking about that and what we do about it?
Yeah, the answer is yes. So small baseline interferometry is basically like any other INSAR workflow, with the exception that you're selecting carefully the pair of INSAR data you're using. So we have a tool called INS-Info that will calculate not only the temporal baseline, but also the perpendicular baseline. So based on this tool, let's say you have a folder with 30 INSAR pairs, and you want to select only the pairs that have a small temporal baseline, let's say of 15 days, and a small perpendicular baseline, maybe 90 meters, or any range of perpendicular baseline you want. So you can specify those criteria and you can run through like an input folder and select only the pairs that met your criteria. So yes, SBAS is fully supported in Geomatica.
Okay, great. We had another question about measuring a single point deformation. So measuring a specific location on in a particular part of the image, I'm guessing. One thing that I don't think we showed in the demonstration is our temporal charting tool. I'm not quite sure that we demonstrated that. I'm not sure if that answers the question or not, but maybe.
So if you want to measure deformation at a single point, you will have to process a small area of interest. Let's say you enter like an area of 100 pixel by 100 columns, but maybe a little bit larger than that. And you will go through the whole INSAR workflow for deformation. And at the end, you will stack all your deformation value, and you can select a point on the image, and with a temporal chart that we have is a tool in Geomatica, you can see either the velocity or the cumulative change, depending on what you have choose when you stack your data.
Yeah, and that's a visualization of the data, but obviously that data resides in the file and there's a numerical record of it, so it could be exported out to a report or...
That can be either cumulative displacement, so per year, let's say over a year, the cumulative displacement have been 12 centimeters, minus 5 centimeters. There is subsidence. You can have the velocity. This all the data you have. You can visualize it, or you can simply have it in your stack and do a point and compute some statistic for it.
In an operational scenario, I'm guessing people who are using our software or other software like ours to deliver a product to an end user, I'm guessing that's being produced as a, I don't know, a shapefile or maybe a raster with some values that then gets layered into an operational system. I'm not sure. What do you think, or what's your experience there?
So once you have your stack of data, So you have like 15 layers representing everyone representing an interferogram between a pair. So you can create a shape file or a pix file on top of it, a point file. So, and with those points, you will store in the attribute table what are the velocity measurements or the cumulative displacement for every point you select.
Right. Yeah, there's, I mean, there's a lot of tools available within Geomatica to make those kinds of products, generating those kinds of products easy to accomplish. We have a question here. I'm not quite sure if you've read it, Gabrielle, but it says, is merging two different frames for Sentinel-1 IW mode automatic or not using Geomatica?
By two frames, we mean SWAs?
I think so.
Yeah, it's automatic, yeah. When you ingest the image, we have this module called SAR ingest. Everything is assembled automatically. So we have put some heuristics behind to assure that we don't have, can I say, that the phase is well preserved between the SWAs. So we don't see like big line or disruption between the SWAs, but it's done automatically. So the user have nothing to do, or you don't have to tweak the parameters, let's say, to have a good mosaic of those two SWAs.
So the answer is yes, it's automatic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, short answer is yes.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I'm just summarizing. So one interesting question just came in. It's not related to Sentinel-1, but it's related to INSAR. So I think it's a useful one, and let's leverage Gabrielle's expertise here. So this person says, I have 20 pieces of CSK, I'm assuming that's Cosmos SkyMed images, but the baselines are much bigger than my expectations, such as negative 1,500 meters. What do you recommend? Is it okay for deformation monitoring?
No, 500 meters.
1,500, 1,500. That's quite big, yeah?
Yeah, we could extract maybe a good DM out of that, but for deformation analysis, this is not close enough.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if this particular person is saying that all of the images are 1,500 meters apart, but there's 20 in the stack. So perhaps they could leverage INS info, for example, to understand the perpendicular baselines and select the most suitable images to use for the deformation analysis.
Yeah, we have technique in Geomatica that if you have a folder with, like, let's say your 20 images with INS info, you can select which baseline you want. So you could say select any pairs that have been acquired within like 30 days apart, 30 days, and also if the perpendicular baseline is within, let's say, 0 and 200 meters.
Right.
So you will only process those pairs.
And those are some of the scripts that we're making available. We haven't quite gotten there yet, but I know that you've been developing a lot of Python scripts that we're going to be making available through our support site. Is that right? So that's a specific script that you wrote that accomplishes that?
Yeah, I wrote scripts for automation that relink all the PPF together, because we say that automation is one of the objectives for users. So right now you will typically run the different INSAR module one after each others. And in the philosophy of all the INSAR SWI that we have developed is also, we really have to pay attention to develop a really good balance between the number of parameters that people have to specify, not to overwhelm the user with all different kind of parameters, but to also let the user to select some of them, because we don't also want to have a black box. But still, to link the PPF together requires some automation, and Python is one of the way you can achieve that. And yeah, this will be resources on our website.
Okay. We have a really good question that just came in from someone I know. So what about combining adjacent north-south same orbit products for Sentinel-1 for cases where the framing changes over time and an AOI is split between products at times for a given date? Does PCI allow combining products and treating their bursts as contiguous? I'm not sure if you can see the question or not.
No, I cannot see the questions.
Let me just come out of your side. So just click on this guy.
Okay.
You should see. So it's down here.
Okay, I can see it now.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, that's a.
Mm.
I think that's a tough question, but Gabriel's reading it right now. This is
Yeah,
not a test.
there's multiple items.
So combining adjacent north-south. So I'm guessing ascending and descending. Is that what the question is about?
Now, if this is ascending and descending, the answer is no. We cannot like process them in a single stack.
But I think the question is adjacent north-south. So there, I'm
Mhm.
just rereading it carefully. So you've got two passes. I guess they're next to each other, and the question is, the AOI is actually on the boundary of the two Sentinel-1 images.
Oh
So
yeah.
how would that work?
I think I've processed the data over Bakersfield with the Sentinel-1 data, and yeah, the SWAT have moved a little bit across time. Where it's not drifting, but I think the orbit have changed a little bit. So if there is a sufficient overlap between the image, yes, it's possible.
Okay. Hopefully we answered that question. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry.
you need overlap, but of course, if the viewing geometry is really different, because there is from the acquisition geometry, there is a shift of several kilometers.
Mhm.
Now, yeah, it might be difficult, but if the SWAT just move from, let's say, a few hundred meters or maybe 1 kilometers, and the viewing geometry, I mean, the incidence angle where you're looking your different target on the ground is not too different.
Mhm.
Yeah, it will work.
Cool. That's a great question. Thanks for that one. We're just coming up to the hour. It's been it's just been under an hour. So I think with that, I'm going to close off the question and answer period. I want to ask Jason to turn on his webcam. Say our final goodbyes here. So thanks everyone for attending the webinar. It's a pleasure to have you. Thanks for spending the last hour with us. If you have any questions, don't be shy. Send us an email. We're all last name at PCI Geomatics. So it's Jones at PCI, Flat at PCI, and Gosselin. 2 S's, 1 L. Is that correct? Gosselin? Gosselin
Yeah,
is
2
S's,
S. Yeah.
GOSSELIN at PCIGeomatics.com if you've got a question for Gabrielle. Thanks so much for attending the webinar today, and have a great day.